Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young, licensed clinical social worker. This is a weekly podcast where we explore the strengths we have because of our sensitivity and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hey there. To the creatives, healers, sensitives, deep thinkers, thank you so much for joining me. Today I have the pleasure of talking with Dr. Tom Murray about the 5 love languages. This was a really great conversation, and he talks about the 5 love languages and why it's so important for us to know what our love language is and our partner's love language. Dr. Tom Murray is an international trainer, educator, and couples and sex therapist. He is a widely sought-after expert in the fields of sexuality and intimate relationships. For 15 years, Tom has worked with everyday folks to embrace their weirdness, shed labels and shame, lean into anxiety, and build better and stronger relationships. Murray appeared in numerous venues, including the Huffington Post, the Daily Mail, as well as radio, television, and podcasts, including The Practice of Being Seen and Shrink Wrap Radio. Murray directs a group practice in Greensboro, North Carolina, and holds a faculty appointment at Northwestern University's Family Institute. We also have a chance to talk about why Tom thinks that improv is so helpful. We also get a chance to talk a little bit about play, which I'm always fascinated to know about. I hope you really enjoy this episode. If you live in California and you're interested in working with me, hop on over to patriciayounglcsw.com and on to the show. Hey, Tom, welcome.
Thank you. So glad to be here.
Thanks for being here. I'm so excited to talk to you about the love languages today. I have a million questions for you.
Wonderful. I hope I can answer them all.
All right. First of all, do you identify as a highly sensitive person?
Absolutely. Yes, it resonates quite well with me.
When did you first learn you were a highly sensitive person?
It was probably about 3 or 4 years ago that one of my staff counselors was talking to me about the Hsps temperament, and I really didn't give it much thought until a little later. Really felt that it matched me perfectly.
Interesting. And what do you think of the actual term highly sensitive person?
I struggle with it a little bit. Certainly I identify as sensitive because I understand, or at least I believe I understand, Dr. Aaron's emphasis on that kind of, it's sensitive like a engineer would use the word sensitive, like a scale is sensitive. So when I hear the word sensitive, I can kind of translate it in my own head. Certainly recognize that other people may confuse sensitive with overly sensitive. And so sometimes I'll translate it differently to being very observant.
So if there were another term that you were able to use instead of highly sensitive person, what would you use?
Yeah, I would probably use something like really observant, just having a keen awareness of what's going on around you.
I know in animal studies, I think with the rhesus monkeys, they term them highly responsive. I really like that.
Yes. Wow.
Yeah.
That's so rich. It has that. Mm-hmm. I imagine a lot of people could connect with that.
Yeah. My guess is when Dr. Aaron came up with the term, I don't think that she was, this is a story I'm making up in my head. I have nothing to substantiate this with. My guess is that she was not thinking about the long-term ramifications of the name that she chose, just because our culture really doesn't value sensitivity.
True. Yes. Yeah. And I think in the academic literature, it's, what is it? Sensory processing sensitivity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a mouthful.
It is. It is. How do you feel about being a highly sensitive person?
How do I feel about it? I certainly see it as a strength. I describe it as a superpower. And of course, it's my goal to really help other people see it and see it as a superpower too.
Me too. Me too. So we are ready to talk about the 5 love languages. Can you tell us what it is, but why is it important for us to even know about this?
Yeah, well, Gary Chapman, who incidentally lives here in North Carolina and Winston-Salem, which is only about 25 miles from me, really developed through the observation of his own clients, recognized that people tend to be grouped in one of these 5 different preferences for how to receive love. It becomes important to know your own love language and your partner's love language, because ultimately, if we love our partner, we want them to experience it. We want to love them in the way that they can receive our love. And they may have particular preferences. And if we can know what our partner's preferences are, then it really promotes a much more healthier relationship.
And I think it's pretty common for us to give the love language that's meaningful to us without even knowing that we're doing it. And if it doesn't feel like love, or if it's not the love language of our partner, then they miss the whole thing. And here we feel like we're being incredibly loving. And they're like, how come you don't do what's really important and meaningful to me?
Yes, that's exactly right. We often want to love others in the way that we prefer to be loved. That's right.
Do you think it's best to put out what the 5 love languages are and then go back and break them down? I'm not really sure how to approach this, so I feel like this is your jam. So what do you think the best way to do this is?
Yeah, what I'll do is go ahead and list the 5 love languages, and then go in and just briefly describe each one. How's that
Sounds
work?
Great.
So the first love language is, and these are in no particular order. One is not better than the other, but the first that I'll talk about is words of affirmation. The second is quality time, receiving gifts, acts of service, and physical touch. And these, in essence, represent the various ways that people prefer to have love shown to them. So that first one, words of affirmation, that really is, to hear someone say, I love you, or to receive compliments is a way that one experiences love. It's the sense that words hold a real value, and there's power there. And it's a way to strengthen the bond, is to hear that your partner cares deeply about you, not just this kind of I'm supposed to intuit it, but rather that your partner is saying it with their words. The next one is quality time. And this is really about having your partner's undivided attention. Unlike words of affirmation, where the person may feel talk is cheap, being able to spend time with your partner can feel very comforting, can feel very satisfying. Kind of along the lines, those people who have quality time preferences may be particularly irritated by their partner on their cell phone, for example, or being distracted by other things.
Interesting. It's funny, when I was a kid, my mom was going to therapy. This was in the 70s. And this is not a slam on my mom. She was a single parent, very overwhelmed, very anxious. And so her quote gift to me was, I got 30 minutes of undivided attention once a week. Yeah. So my wounding is I feel like I'm too much and I'm too needy. Where do you think that came from?
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mom said you only get 30 minutes of my undivided attention for over 7 days.
That was her gift to me.
Wow.
And,
bless her.
And I understand that at the time that's what the therapist thought was really helpful. And, my mom and I have done an incredible amount of healing work, but because my primary wound is I'm too much and I'm too needy, where do you think that one came from? Yeah. Anyways, Go ahead. Back to you.
The third one is receiving gifts. This is the experience of receiving special tokens of appreciation, special gifts that communicate I'm thinking about you or you're important to me. And sometimes people can maybe wrongfully assume that the person is materialistic, but that really isn't at all the issue, but rather that it is a sign of appreciation to be able to give gifts. Now, receiving gifts is not my particular love language, but I want to talk about, I have one of my very good friends who's a social worker in Sacramento, is a phenomenal gift giver. Quite frankly, I find sometimes it triggers anxiety in me when I want to gift give in the assumption that that's their love language. And will I be good enough, which is kind of my own wounding, to be able to give a gift at the level that she does.
So you're saying specifically with this person, when you need to give her a gift because she's so phenomenal, that you worry about specifically with her, are you going to be able to match that ability to pick out the perfect gift?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not a great gift giver.
Oh, it is. I am so fascinated and impressed by those people who are.
Mm-hmm.
They just find the right thing, and it's the details. It's not just the gift, but it's usually something is there's a theme and quotes tied to each piece, and this is it. I'm impressed.
And the gift givers love it. Like they love looking for the perfect gift.
Yeah. So the next one is acts of service. And this is just simply the recognition that actions speak louder than words. They want their partner to do things, in essence, that helps their life to be easier. Love is communicated by doing things for the partner. That might be washing the car, for example, ensuring that maybe your dinner's picked up on the way home. There are different ways that we can communicate our acts of service. Okay. And then lastly is physical touch, which maybe is pretty self-explanatory, that people who prefer this love language like to do things such as hand holding, kissing, any contact, maybe just some light PDA, as they're walking down the street. That means a lot to those who prefer physical touch.
And can people have more than one love language?
They generally, how Dr. Chapman arranges it is you identify your top two. So we want to see what are the love languages that people have and what are their top two preferences.
And how do people figure out what their love language is? I mean, they may have a sense from what you've just said, but if they're not really sure, how do you really figure it out?
There are several tests that you can take online through a series of questions about your particular preferences. Then it helps you to see what your love language is.
Okay. And if people want to go online, do you happen to know? If not, you can let me know and I can put it in the show notes.
I'll be happy to provide that after the interview.
Since you work with highly sensitive people, do HSPs tend to favor certain love languages over non-HSPs?
I have not particularly found that to be the case. I think it often depends on their sensitivity.
Okay.
So, for example, I am not a gifts person, right? That's not my primary love language. Touch is my primary love language. And I think that tends to be gender specific. For a lot of men, touch is their primary love language. I enjoy words of affirmation. Quality time, for example, if someone, their HSP, their sensitivity is around sound or noise, they may not want to do a lot of activities that feel over-arousing. So I imagine that depending on one's particular sensitivities, it may impact their preferred love language.
I guess for me, when I think of quality time is, and again, this goes back to what I didn't get enough of, is when people are willing to step into my world when I'm struggling, to come over and help me with stuff, that is so nurturing and healing. So when I think of quality time, in my mind, it doesn't always have to be going out to do an activity, but when people are willing to really enter my world to help me where I'm struggling, that, oh my gosh, that just feels so just, I don't even have words for it.
Well, and what I hear too is that it's about being seen.
Mm-hmm.
Toni Morrison said that every child, when they walk into a room, long to see an adult's eyes light up.
Mm-hmm.
I think that in that space of quality time, being seen, particularly during that time of vulnerability, like you described, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. How much do you think, since I've been talking about it, how much do you think our wounding ends up playing into what our, I don't know, do you say preferred love languages? Like what would be the verb that you would use?
Yeah, preferred love language. That's a question that I haven't particularly given a lot of thoughts to, but certainly can see how we may both want and resent wanting our love language to be, I think, to have, like I said, physical touch. But there are times when I don't want it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Where there's this feeling of too much again, and I think that, in my own woundedness, where there were boundary violations or, people who invaded my space, I think that it's that both and you can have that tension there of wanting it, but resenting that you want it in a particular time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I would imagine too that what I see when I work with people that are aging is that as their need for dependence increases and they lose their independence with driving and needing more help and needing more support, part of it is generational.
Mm-hmm.
But, hating that dependence and needing it. And I guess for some of the folks that I work with, I can see how it's about the value that they were raised with was about being independent and not having to need anybody. And so I guess that's what came to mind when you were talking about the wanting it and resenting wanting it. And I don't know if that really fits into what we're talking about here, but that's just what popped in my head.
Yeah, yeah. Like I enjoy my alone time. And yeah, I also recognize that I need people,
Mm-hmm.
and I enjoy being around people. I just find that if I'm around people for an extended period of time, it can be quite draining.
But I think that specifically, at least in my mind, relates to being a highly sensitive person, because I think that this is where, as HSPs, we need to be much more mindful about finding that balance where we get enough, but not too much, because the too much can really end up sometimes taking a couple days to recover from if we really extend that beyond what we need.
Yeah, brilliantly said. My partner and I went to London last month, and we were together, 24 hours for about a week. And when I came back, it was important for me to just have space.
Sure.
To have space. And fortunately, she identifies as an HSP too, so it was able to unfold without it being personal.
You guys both recognize that you need to have some time alone to recharge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to recharge from our vacation.
Yeah. Well, I think we do need a vacation after our vacation because we're out of our routine, and I think routine is really comforting and creates a lot of peace for us. And just having to do things differently can be undoing.
Yeah,
even if it is a fun vacation.
Indeed. You said quality time you thought was your primary love language. Did you have a second one?
I think probably words of affirmation, like what it feels like is being seen and heard, is so important to me. And I find that that's what I tend to offer people as well. Is that pretty common that what our love language is what we are the most proficient in giving?
Yes. And our impulse is to want to do what we're good at.
Sure.
Right. And when I work with my couples, that's the amendment that I give to the 5 love languages, which, the 5 love languages really says find out what your partner's preference is and love them in the way that they can receive it. I take a different approach and I amend that, and that is helping a couple to do a little bit of changing and accepting. And so what I mean by that is for a couple to agree that each of them may be an expert in giving love in a particular way. And sometimes that expertise is not one's preferred love language to receive. So with that little bit of acceptance, a little bit of change, we can have this middle way, what I call the, kind of the Buddhist middle way. So I may be really good at gift giving, which I'm not, but if I could be really good at gift giving and my partner wants or prefers quality time, then I will accept that about my partner and do quality time. At the same time, my partner can accept that for me, if I feel good in the gift giving, then I can do that as well.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. You kind of gave a specific example, but you were very clear, but my mind drifted. And so when that happens, it could just be that my mind drifted. But I'm wondering, can you give a really specific example, like pick two people and the way one would love one person and the way they would love the other, and then the adaptation they would need to make? Am I putting you on the spot by asking you to do that?
Well, so for example, the love language of words of affirmation, I tend to be, is something I'm really good at.
Okay.
Is building people up, right? But if my partner prefers quality time, then I'm going to want to spend I want to spend quality time with my partner because that's the way my partner can receive love. My hope, though, is that if my partner was excellent at gift giving, then I would be willing to receive the gifts knowing that in their giving it to me, that they're loving me.
Got it.
That I will take appreciation for it, even though it's not exactly my preference.
Okay.
But I want them to feel competent in what they're doing. So it's a little where Gary Zukav, or Chapman rather, would say, know what your partner's love language is and only love them in that way. I think that we can adapt it and we can be responsive to our partner's own expertise and be willing to accept how they love us when it's their preferred way.
What if you have a partner and you can't figure out what their love language is? My husband.
Oh, wow. Well, I guess certainly having them take the assessment would be a good place to start.
Mm-hmm.
And then you might want to look at how they respond to people in other relationships. Who are the people that they seem to be most close to? And watch their dynamic. How is love expressed between them? Because I think we're drawn to people who love us the way that feels good.
Mm-hmm. I think, too, for some men, I'm just hesitating here. I think for some men that there's a value in not wanting or needing anything. And so there's a vulnerability there.
Mm.
I think definitely taking the test would be helpful, but it's not uncommon for me to find men that say, like, I don't need anything. I'm fine. I'm good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So would I don't need anything, would the thing tend to be materialistic or even needing help? Like, what do you mean by need anything? Are there parameters around that?
I think that when people in general have had neglect as children, like I'm not talking about blatant neglect, but just having, maybe they're the youngest kid. And so by the time they come around, their parents are sort of done. And so the child gets all their needs met. but does not have parents that are super attentive. What I've seen in a number of clients is that they end up having a lot of pride in being very self-sufficient and not needing anything. And because they don't know what they missed, there's a whole language and expression that they just don't even know. And so they can't even verbalize what they missed to know that they would like it.
Yeah. And I while that may happen in families in which there's neglect, I just think, quite frankly, Patricia, that is the individualistic culture that we live in.
Yeah.
Think about how Europeans came to America in particular. So much was leaving your families and having to make do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that really predominates, and I think men suffer because of it.
Yeah, definitely. I'm feeling like I should be asking you more specific questions, and I'm just not really sure what to ask you.
Well, when I think about what why this applies to my work, or how this applies to my work, is I do mostly couples therapy. I'm very much interested in what has happened in that couple where they're not doing these things. They're not demonstrating kindness. They're not motivated to learn about their partner in these unique ways to love and support their partner. And sometimes we have to break the logjam. And infuse in that relationship some new information. And so the 5 love languages provides a relatively easy and understandable way to do concrete things for your partner. Especially if there's a long period of time that's gone on where partners are just living parallel lives, or like ships passing in the night, if you will.
I'm wondering too, and it's interesting because you had mentioned this earlier in the interview, but I'm thinking about it, I think from an opposite point of view, that if you have a partner whose love language is quality time, but they are maybe not a highly sensitive person, and so they want to go to fairs, and they like going to concerts, and they like going to things that really are not very HSP friendly, if that ends up creating some conflict because the activities that they really find joy in are not things that the HSP would really value or would be challenging for the HSP.
Absolutely. And, to add on there, maybe extroversion in the non-HSP partner. And so they're wanting to get their needs met, and they want to have these experiences. And they also want to have a witness to their life. So they want their partner to come along. And if their partner is HSP, then what has to happen is some tweaking about planning for those, like a party, for example. So sometimes I'll have couples drive separately to parties so they can show up and enjoy the time, and then the HSP partner can leave when it feels comfortable.
Yeah, that's a great workaround. My husband would be happy in 100-degree weather in the middle of Dubai with 5,000 people in a crowded square with noise and people and activities. And like he'd just be as happy as a clam. And that is so not my idea of a good time. Obviously every time I do an interview, there's always, I do it because it's something that's fascinating and that I'm curious about, and then I'm obviously learning things. And so as we're talking about this, I'm really thinking that the stuff that my husband loves to do is stuff that I don't do. And I can see how, we've been married 21 years. And I just recently realized how much I love play, and that I stopped doing things for play because, he wasn't that interested in it. And I didn't realize that it was important. And I needed to say like, hey, this is important to me. And I think in the same way, things that he really loves doing, I'm like, I'm not doing that. And so now that we've sent our kids off to college, we're really having an opportunity to kind of recreate our relationship. So this is interesting. And I think it's not uncommon for HSPs to not participate in certain things because it doesn't work. But now in retrospect, going like, I don't know that I've been the most loving, generous wife because of my own limitations. And while I'm not going to go stand in the middle of a crowded square where it's 100 degrees, there are some ways that I can show up for him that are going to be meaningful that I can do for a manageable amount of time without me getting overwhelmed and overstimulated.
Exactly. And sometimes it might be just encouraging your partner to have those experiences without you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like I've always been great about that with him. And seriously, he goes to Laughlin twice a year because he loves it. He goes to concerts probably every other month. He's got his buddy, and my kids love going to concerts. And so, I've never been like, you can't go because I don't want to. I'm like, please go and do it. Like, I just can't deal.
Yeah. Well, I know that, for example, I have two sons. They enjoy adventures and going to amusement parks. They love amusement parks. And so we were going to a Carowinds, which is a large amusement park here in North Carolina. Going down there, I let them know that there was a high probability that at some point in the day, I was going to become quiet.
Mm-hmm.
And that did not at all indicate that I was unhappy or wanted to leave, but really that I was going into conservation mode in order to continue to spend time with them, because I want to spend time with them. But it's very stimulating, a lot of sounds, smells, the roller coaster rides, which I happen to enjoy. But it's that there's a price to pay, in doing those activities. And so being able to communicate with your family members about how you might end up showing up because of your sensitivities is a way to, I think, is another way to to demonstrate love. Because you're saying preemptively, don't take it personally, but I'm going to suspect I'll be quiet at some point.
Absolutely. And it also helps them to increase their awareness and sensitivity around future partners and friends that they may have in the future. It opens that dialogue for how do you talk about what you need and what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And when we teach those skills to our kids, I think we're giving them a huge gift.
Yeah. Your what you just said reminded me of every once in a while, my youngest son, who I think is HSP as well, will be in the back seat of the car and he'll be like, Daddy, I'm just going to close my eyes and go to sleep for a few minutes. And it's like, that doesn't seem like something an 8-year-old would generally say.
No. Well, and we take in 80% of our environment through our eyes. So as HSPs, when we are feeling overwhelmed and overstimulated, one of the things that you can do is just close your eyes for a few minutes. So it sounds like he's really learned what he needs and he's able to self-regulate without even knowing what it is that he's doing. What a gift.
Yeah. I hadn't really thought of it that way before, Patricia, but thank you. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Okay, switching gears a little bit. What are some of the challenges that you experience as a highly sensitive person?
Oh, for a good part of my life, people would describe me as moody. It was so helpful to read that is a common descriptor for HSPs.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that scenario, going to the amusement park and going into conservation mode, I think, from the outsider looking in, they would see it as moody. The other thing as an HSP, of course, depth of processing is a key characteristic of HSP. So I tend to go inside and think and have full-fledged conversations with myself. I remember one time I was taking a walk with someone, and I was processing in my own head, and then I blurted out what I thought was an original thought. The person with me said, I just said that, weren't you listening? And so that, it can show up for me in those kinds of ways. And then over arousability, the other piece, again, when my children were young, I remember my youngest son, sound, I think I mentioned sound is really my sensitivity. And so the pitch of his cry was so grating that I had to wear earmuffs when I changed his diaper.
Wow.
Where my oldest son, his cry didn't bother me at all.
Interesting. Did
Yeah.
you know you were in HSP when you had to put the earphones on?
No.
Oh, that was a
No.
great adaptation.
Yeah, yeah. I just knew that, wow, this is painful. It was really painful. So another thing I found, and I think this is the thing that a lot of men do, but may not realize they're HSPs, is partners will get angry if their male partner spends too much time in the bathroom.
Hmm.
And that was a complaint that I had gotten. And part of it was I just used that as getting away
Yeah.
from the stimulation. You know, I was married. I was married for 10 years, quite some time ago. Looking back, complaints that were there about the marriage or about how I showed up in the marriage, I can now really see how it was tied to my HSP.
Yeah. And I think that's why I have such passion about providing as much education as I can, because the more that we know what works for us and what doesn't, and we create language around it, we get to talk about it. And then we can create worlds and lives and lifestyles that support us more. And when they don't, we recognize what it is, as opposed to just feeling like we're having conflict and not understanding. You're saying that your partner didn't understand why you were always hanging out in the bathroom.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And in your own practice, Patricia, do people come to you already knowing that they're HSP, or do you often find that through your interviewing you suspect it and then make the determination later?
Well, my marketing now is directly to people that are highly sensitive or have been told that they're too much, too needy, too sensitive, too whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I also work with people that just really want to dig in and work. You don't have to be an HSP to work with me. But the clients that I had prior to specializing, quite a number of them, I don't sit and do a test with them, but I can definitely see the trait for sensitivity or for perfectionism or for overthinking things, or all of those things I think end up showing up. And they say that Dr. Aaron says that 50% of folks that are in therapy are highly sensitive people.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I really want therapists to become HSP knowledgeable, because in their attempts to get their HSP clients to be more like everybody else, to toughen up and to suck it up, that is just such a disservice. And I can't tell you how many clients I've had that come to me and have had wounding from therapists that were not HSP sensitive or knowledgeable, you know, and they cry when I validate them, because all their life they've been told to get over it and suck it up. And finally someone's saying, like, of course you're this way. Like, we don't want you to suck it up and get over it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I find too, again, as a male therapist, I tend to get a lot of male clients too. When I have them take the HSP test, it's not unusual for them, if I suspect that they're HSP, for their scores to be like a 12 or 13, the cutoff is 14. But if I have them take the child version, then, you know, based on what they were told as a child that they were, or if their parent is still alive, having them complete it based on their recollection of their child, they often score much higher.
Yep. Yep. I just did an episode with Matt Maher, and he let me give him the test as part of our episode.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah, because he kind of had that same thing. And I think because we don't value sensitivity in our culture,
Yes.
males tend to bury it. A lot of women too. And if you would have given me the HSP test 10, 20 years ago, there's no way I would have passed for being an HSP.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. Yeah, back when I was 30, I'm 55 now, I was in a recovery home for my eating disorder, and every morning we had to do a feelings check-in. I couldn't even tell you what a feeling was. I mean, seriously, I could not identify my feelings, and they put me on a contract where I could only talk in one sentence because I'd use a wall of words. I didn't have a feeling vocabulary. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So there is benefit to doing your own work.
Indeed. Indeed. And isn't that, that my therapist he's been around the block for many more decades than I have. He had never heard of HSP.
Mm-hmm.
But when I exposed it to him, he of course quickly identified with it too. It gives us a common language. It's like a secret code.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if you have a therapist that's trying to get you to act like the other 80% that we're not, it really can inflict so much damage. And I've had a handful of therapists and nobody ever talked to me about being an HSP. So,
Right.
We just got to spread the word.
Yeah, no one's ever talked to me about it either. I think, though, that unfortunately, there's that both and, how do we, kind of in a similar vein that I was talking about the five love languages and matching or incorporating your particular strengths in terms of how you prefer to love. I think the same is true with HSP, is that we don't have the luxury of that we had maybe thousands of years ago, where we only lived in communities of about 150 people, and we could probably easily accommodate or adjust because there wasn't all the stimulation, for example. A lot of the work is helping HSPs navigate a non-HSP world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I find, and then I really want to ask you another question, but I'm loving our conversation. I just want this to go on for forever. I find so much of the work that I do with HSPs, though, is about really having them learn about their own traits first and to understand why they do what they do and what the value in that is. And once they get that and can start to love and appreciate that, for me, then the next step is, how do you take who you are and show up in the rest of the 80% of the world and make it work for you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so Tom, what do you do for play?
Oh, I wish I could be better at that. I'm actually writing a book called Making Nice with Naughty. It's the application of comedy improv to opening up one's sexual life and getting rid of sexual inhibition. I was inspired because I took improv classes, and for me, that was the most enriching experience. I love doing improv. It pushes me out of my comfort zone because I can be pretty cerebral. Improv is you just laugh and have a good time. So that's a thing that I really enjoy. And the other thing is I have quite a fondness for singing. And so anytime I have an opportunity to be with a group or to perform, it's not pressure for me. So it is play. It is enjoyable. I get to do that. And of course, I have two kids who enjoy playing, and I can participate with them as well.
Mm-hmm. I find most HSPs laugh when I ask them this question because I think we do tend to be more cerebral. I think that what our concept of play is different than what we do. And I think we do a lot more play. But like my guess is writing your book for you is probably play because it's stimulating and it's creative and it's using those skills that you have. But we don't think of writing a book as play.
No, but your question reminded me of an experience I had back when I was in college, and a girlfriend and I went to the mall, and I walked into the Disney store. Of course, it's tons of colors, these big screens everywhere, the music blaring. And I remember she looking at me, she's like, "What's wrong with you? Why aren't you excited about all of this?"
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, it's too much. So, I think some people can assume that we as HSPs are party poopers, but it's really the condition. So you're absolutely right. Getting into the flow when I'm writing the book, I just step into the flow and it is really enriching, or learning a new music piece, moments of bliss.
I have a theory, and I don't have enough experience to back it up, but my theory is that for those of us that tend to be more cerebral, that, play for us is when we find a project and we get really focused on it, that's where we kind of find our happy place. But because non-HSPs don't get it, we get negative messaging about it. And I can tell you that with this podcast, I am so focused and, spend hours in my office coming up with material and editing and coming up with cover art. And I am just so in my happy place because my creativity is flowing and I'm just using all of these skills.
Yes.
But when I talk to friends, I'm not getting negative messages from them, but, because this is pretty much all I talk about, I have that thing I'm sorry that I'm really happy for once and I'm really focused and finding joy and feeling like it must not be okay. And that my guess is that in the past, I've gotten a lot of negative messaging because I find something that works for me and that's just what I want to do. And I think because it doesn't fit the norm of what everybody else does, we don't look at it as play and then either receive negative messaging or we give ourselves negative messaging. And it's kind of sad.
Yeah. I don't know how you feel about this, Patricia, but I really, really love my work.
Mm-hmm.
And, people probably could easily say I'm a workaholic, but when I hear that term, maybe I don't know enough about the term, but when I hear that term, I think of it as using work to avoid something else. And I don't have that feeling. Therapy is incredibly creative.
Mm-hmm.
The juices, creative juices are quite, they're just flowing for me when I'm in session with my couples or with individuals. And so I get, we may not want to admit it in our profession, but I'll readily admit I get a lot of my needs met through my clinical work.
Yeah. Well, for me, it's that I've got these innate gifts and strengths. And when I'm with a client that's a really good fit, it's using all the things that I've got and it's energizing. It's exciting to be able to utilize the depth of the skills that I have. And that's what I hear you saying, that we really get to engage and be fully present because we're using the parts of us that are very finely tuned and developed and have these skills to offer.
And isn't that that's what I want, and I would want for anybody else, is that they can find a place in their life, find a career that essentially allows them to be who they are.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm having this thought in the back of my head. If any of my clients are listening, I yawn a lot during session. So I'm fidgety and I'm a yawner. It's just how I am. So,
are you authentic with your yawns, or do you suppress them?
Oh, I'm totally authentic because it just doesn't work to hide them.
See, that's where my conscientiousness as an HSP comes in, and I'm like, I got to suppress my yawn.
No, so if I were listening to my therapist, I'd be thinking, you're not acting super engaged when you're with me and all you do is yawn. And so I'd be thinking that I was the client that was not my therapist's ideal client. But I just want everybody to know that I yawn and I fidget during almost every single one of my sessions, no matter who you are and how engaged I am.
Well, I hope this isn't too depressing, but I identify as an adult child of child sexual abuse. And when I was reading more about being an adult survivor of childhood sexual abuse, I learned that yawning is very common among that group of people, and that it has something tied to trauma. At the same time, I can't help but to wonder if it's, as an HSP, independent of that trauma, if, because can be depleted of energy so quickly. If a situation is over, just requires a lot of us, that our yawning is an attempt to reset.
Yeah, for me, it's a form of self-regulation.
And
that, when I'm really focused on what's going on for a client, especially if most of my clients don't come because they're having these great experiences and they just come and want to tell me how beautiful their lives are. They come to us because they're struggling with things. And for me, I think it's definitely how I self-regulate. And the more I think about not yawning, once I yawn, the worse it gets.
Yeah.
So I just own it. And
Good for you. I admire that about you.
everybody keeps coming back, so I don't know. Hey, Tom,
Yeah.
what are some of your superpowers being a highly sensitive person?
There are probably a couple. One is that in school, when I was in elementary, middle school, high school, I knew if my teachers had a brand new outfit on
Hmm.
and would say, "Oh, that's a new outfit." Like for whatever reason, people's clothes just would sear into my brain.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the other thing is, I know there's some controversy around the use of the word empath and HSP and whether they're interchangeable or not. But there are certain times where I genuinely feel like I am picking up on, I'm plugged into my clients and I'm picking up on information that may be not clearly visible or clearly seen by perhaps other people, and can make inferences in such a way that my clients report back, yeah, that's true, but I've never told you that. So
Mm-hmm.
making declarative statements. So those would be examples of HSP as a superpower for me.
Oh, that's great. What would you tell your younger self about being a highly sensitive person?
It's not personal.
Mm.
It's really not personal. That it's a high probability people will have difficulty understanding you. It's a high probability that they'll not, that there will be parts of me that they won't get. That when we represent 20% of the population, 80% of people don't experience things to the depth that we experience.
Mm.
I'm a crier. I'll listen to NPR and just choke up,
Mm-hmm.
or going to the movies and watching a preview.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I would get self-conscious about it. And so if I knew then what I know now, it's not personal, and self-compassion and self-advocacy, quite frankly, would
Mm-hmm.
all be important things for me to know then.
That's beautiful. Tom, I know we're running out of time, so where can people find you?
They can visit me at my website at drtommurray.com.
All right. And I will put that in the show notes. Is there anything else before we go, Tom?
Patricia, this was such a lovely conversation. You're a natural, and it's been a real joy being with you.
Oh, thanks. There are so many other topics that you are so versed on. So what we may do in the future is I may have you back, because I felt like I wanted to hear about the 5 love languages, but you have so many amazing specialties that I really would love to dive in with you a little bit deeper in the future.
Sounds like fun. I look forward to it.
All right. Thanks so much, Tom. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for being here today. I hope you enjoyed the show and you have a better idea of what your love language is, and maybe the love language of the people that are close to you. If you're enjoying this podcast, please share it with other people and hop on over to Apple iTunes and rate and review. It makes a huge difference in who's able to find this podcast. I'll put a link in the show notes with directions how to provide a rating. If you listen on an iPhone, you can just go to rate and review within the app. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's our superpower. Have a blessed day.